A funny thing happened on the way to becoming the internet's self-appointed king of masculinity. The man who spent years lecturing millions of young men about strength, discipline, honor, loyalty, and personal responsibility somehow keeps finding himself surrounded by allegations involving manipulation, coercion, exploitation, human trafficking, investigations, civil lawsuits, criminal prosecutions, and enough seized court records to make a filing cabinet beg for mercy. If you only know Andrew Tate through social media clips, you might think he is a misunderstood philosopher, a modern-day warrior poet, a Bugatti-driving sage sent to rescue young men from the horrors of women having opinions. But according to a massive 9-month investigation by New Yorker reporter Heidi Blake, the story behind the empire is something much darker. Far darker than the cigar smoke, sunglasses, and motivational speeches would have you believe. Drawing from thousands of private messages, court filings, internal documents, and interviews with victims and former associates, Blake paints a picture not of a self-help guru, but of an operation built on control, manipulation, and the systematic exploitation of women. And perhaps that's the most remarkable part. Because while prosecutors investigated, while accusers came forward, while journalists documented allegation after allegation, Andrew Tate wasn't disappearing. He was getting bigger. More followers, more money, more influence, more young men hanging on his every word. It's almost inspirational if your dream has always been to watch a real-life Bond villain accidentally become a motivational speaker. This is the story of how a former kickboxer built one of the most influential brands on the internet, how that brand allegedly grew alongside an empire of exploitation, and how millions of followers were convinced they were watching a hero, while investigators claim they were looking at something else entirely. Today's episode is heavily based on the extraordinary reporting of New Yorker investigative journalist Heidi Blake, whose work helped uncover the people, documents, and allegations behind one of the most controversial figures of the modern internet. This is Andrew Tate Exposed. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Long before Andrew Tate became the internet's favorite motivational speaker for men who think empathy is a government conspiracy, he was just another kid growing up between worlds. Born in Washington, D.C. in 1986, Andrew was the son of Andrew Tate, a gifted and highly respected chess master known for his brilliance and eccentricity. Friends described Emery as intellectually intimidating, unpredictable, and fiercely competitive. Those traits would seem to leave a lasting impression on his son. After his parents separated, Andrew and his siblings moved with their mother to England. They settled in Luton, a town north of London that was hardly known for producing future social media emperors. The family struggled financially. Andrew would later tell stories about poverty, hardship, and feeling invisible. Whether those stories were exaggerated or not, one thing seems clear. Andrew Tate hated being ordinary. He hated being powerless. And perhaps most of all, he hated being ignored. As a teenager, he gravitated toward combat sports. Kickboxing offered something that life had not yet provided: attention. In the ring, dominance had value. Aggression was rewarded. Intimidation was a skill. For Andrew Tate, it was the perfect environment. Over the years, he became a successful kickboxer, winning championships and developing the oversized confidence that would later become his trademark. Confidence is one thing. Andrew Tate's version was something else entirely. His public persona often felt less like self-esteem and more like a hostage situation involving reality itself. By his 20s, he had become skilled at attracting attention. The problem was that kickboxing doesn't pay like people imagine. Championship belts look impressive, but they do not come with private jets. Andrew Tate wanted wealth, not comfort or stability, wealth. The kind of wealth that announces itself before you even walk into a room. He wanted the cars, the watches, the mansion, the image, the performance. And that hunger would eventually lead him toward a business opportunity that would define much of his future: webcams. Years later, Tate would openly discuss how he discovered that lonely men on the internet were willing to spend astonishing amounts of money talking to attractive women online. What he described publicly as entrepreneurial genius would become one of the most controversial aspects of his story. According to reporting and numerous legal filings, Andrew Tate and his associates began developing a system for recruiting women into webcam operations. The allegations surrounding how those women were recruited would eventually become central to criminal investigations in multiple countries. Now, the Tates deny wrongdoing. Prosecutors, accusers, and former associates tell a very different story. At the time, however, nobody outside a relatively small circle was paying attention because Andrew Tate was not yet famous. He was building, experimenting, learning, and perhaps most importantly, he was studying human weakness. If there is one recurring theme throughout this story, it is that Andrew Tate appears to have possessed an extraordinary ability to identify exactly what people want to hear. We see this all the time on our episodes when we talk about cult leaders, when we talk about con men, when we talk about serial killers. Young men want confidence. Women want affection. Followers want certainty. And customers want connection. Andrew Tate seemed remarkably willing to provide whatever version of reality produced a profit. Years later, millions would mistake that talent for wisdom. Let's all say that together. I've said this before. The talent for conning people is often mistaken for wisdom. There's a very important distinction between wisdom and manipulation. One helps people understand themselves. The other helps people surrender themselves. When I learned the difference between wisdom and manipulation, I wrote those lines down in my journal, and I have returned to them often. Wisdom helps people understand themselves. Manipulation helps people surrender themselves. As the webcam business expanded, Tate's ambitions expanded with it. The money was getting bigger, and the operation was growing. The future internet celebrity would eventually lecture millions about morality, discipline, and personal responsibility while quietly building the foundation of an empire that investigators would later spend years trying to unravel. The world simply didn't know his name yet. That was about to change. And unfortunately for civilization, Andrew Tate was only getting started. If Andrew Tate had discovered oil in his backyard, he would have drilled for it. If he had discovered gold in a river, he would have mined it. Instead, he discovered something far more profitable: loneliness. The internet has created millions of isolated people searching for attention, affection, validation, and for companionship. For most people, that observation would inspire sympathy. But we are most likely dealing with a psychopath here. They do not have empathy or sympathy. So for Andrew Tate, it inspired a business plan. According to his own descriptions over the years, webcam operations became enormously lucrative. Men would log on, interact with women through private chats, and spend staggering amounts of money during those conversations. That makes me feel sadness, pity, and disgust all at the same time. But according to allegations later documented in lawsuits, criminal investigations, and reporting, the real story behind those operations was far more complicated than glamorous entrepreneurs making money online. Several women described being drawn into the business through romantic relationships or promises of a future together. Prosecutors in Romania would later allege that the Tate brothers used what investigators referred to as the lover boy method, a recruitment tactic in which emotional relationships are used to gain trust before introducing financial exploitation. The brothers deny those allegations and maintain their businesses were legal and consensual. What is striking when examining the allegations is how often the same themes appear: love, trust, dependency, control, again and again and again. Former associates interviewed over the years describe an environment where money flowed upward while influence flowed downward, and Andrew Tate sat at the center. The operation expanded beyond a handful of women, then beyond dozens. Money poured in, luxury followed. Soon came the exotic cars that would later become central to the Tate mythology. At some point, Andrew Tate stopped selling a service. He started selling an identity. The cars weren't transportation, they were props. The watches weren't accessories, they were evidence. Everything became part of a performance. Look at me. Look how rich I am. Look how powerful I am. Look how successful I am. The message is very simple. If Andrew Tate possessed wealth, then Andrew Tate must possess wisdom. This is one of humanity's most persistent weaknesses. People assume success proves virtue. Well, history suggests otherwise. Some of the wealthiest people who ever lived were absolute disasters in human form. Andrew Tate simply understood the marketing value of making the two appear interchangeable. By the late 2010s, he had become increasingly skilled at creating outrage. Controversial statements generated attention, attention generated clicks, and clicks generate money. Money generates influence, and influence generated even more attention. It was a self-feeding machine, a perpetual motion device powered entirely by ego. Then came reality television appearances, online interviews, podcasts, social media clips. Every appearance pushed him further into public consciousness. Critics viewed him as a misogynistic grifter. Supporters viewed him as a truth teller. Andrew Tate seemed perfectly happy with either outcome. Hatred and admiration both generate engagement, and engagement pays remarkably well. Don't ask me about that. I wouldn't know. I'm just a grandma sitting here trying to tell my stories. I'm just having FaceTimes with my friends. But according to investigations and court filings, questions continued to grow around the businesses operating behind the scenes. Questions about the recruitment, the money, the control. Questions that would eventually attract the attention of law enforcement. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this period is that while allegations accumulated, Tate was simultaneously constructing the mythology that would protect him. He wasn't merely building a business anymore. He was building believers. And believers are powerful because once someone convinces themselves that a man is a hero, every accusation becomes a conspiracy against that hero. Again, we've seen cult leaders and religious leaders do this for millennia. Every investigation becomes persecution. Every critic becomes an enemy. That transformation from businessman to ideological figure would prove to be one of the most important developments in this entire story. Because by the time investigators came knocking, Andrew Tate wasn't simply a wealthy entrepreneur. He was becoming something much harder to challenge. A movement. And movements have a way of surviving facts that would destroy ordinary men. Now, before the Andrew Tate apologizers come for me, I want to quote the person we are talking about. Not journalists or prosecutors or former girlfriends or accusers. Andrew Tate himself. One of the strangest parts of the Andrew Tate phenomenon is watching people insist he has been unfairly portrayed while simultaneously ignoring years of statements that came directly out of his own mouth. I gotta stay calm. I gotta stay calm. Among the comments that have helped make this person famous are, I think the woman belongs to the man. Women are given to the man and belong to the man. If you've put yourself in a position to be raped, you must bear some responsibility. I'm going to need a Xanax. I wish I had one. I've actually never taken Xanax before. They scare me. Now, half a lorazepam? Yes, please. Over the years, Andrew Tate has repeatedly described women in terms that many people interpret as ownership rather than partnership. He has publicly discussed physically disciplining women, grabbing them by the neck, and treating dominance as an essential part of relationships. Critics point to these statements as evidence of a deeply misogynistic worldview. Supporters insist they're jokes, exaggerations, role play, or my favorite, taken out of context. You can decide for yourself. Personally, if I spent 10 years talking about controlling people, humiliating people, choking people, slapping people, and treating relationships like business transactions, I would not be shocked when people concluded that I might actually believe some of those things. But apparently, Andrew Tate exists inside a magical reality where every disturbing statement is satire. Every allegation is a conspiracy. Every investigation is persecution. And every critic is simply jealous of his sports cars. Well, I mean, he has to have those cars because ain't nobody jealous of his looks. See, I can do misandry. It works both ways, Mr. Tate. And what makes these comments important is not merely that they are offensive. The internet is overflowing with offensive people. The issue is that millions of young men are told these ideas represent strength. That controlling women is strength, that humiliating women is strength, and that empathy is weakness. That domination is masculinity. And that relationships are power struggles that have to be won. I have not always been the person that I am now, and I have been in an abusive relationship. If I was treated for 8 seconds today, the way that I was treated back then, I would be in jail. You guys know my life motto. I've said it many times here. Do no harm, take no shit. I don't take shit from anybody. So far, that hasn't required physical violence because I have a big mouth. Because I've been a road musician for 2 decades and I've put up with a lot of bullshit. I've had time to hone my craft. The silver tongue is sharp. But I am telling you, if a man ever spoke to me, I'm just laughing because my daughter and I have these conversations and we say some things I can't repeat here, but it is mind-boggling to me that any man thinks this is going to work. On women who are not sure of themselves, it might work in the short term, but you are never, ever, ever going to be happy in any phase of your life treating people badly. You might have money, you might have success, you will never have happiness. And that is how I lay my old little head down on my pillow every night with a smile. Because all the evil people in the world, from politicians to the people we talk about here in the true crime world, they will never know happiness. That is something you and I have that they will never have. It just kills me that somehow, in an age where every piece of human knowledge is available inside a smartphone that you hold in your hand, millions of people decide that this is profound wisdom. It is depressing. And as Tate's online presence exploded, his audience grew at a staggering pace. Misery loves company, and the algorithms love misery. Every controversial statement became free advertising. Every outrage generated millions of views. Every criticism generated millions more. Soon, Andrew Tate was no longer merely a former kickboxer. He was becoming an ideology. The more controversial he became, the larger he grew. The larger he grew, the more untouchable he appeared. And most importantly, the mythology surrounding him continued to expand. It went from this small red pill group on Reddit to Instagram, to Facebook, to TikTok, the cars, the watches, the mansions, the private jets, the performance. But behind this luxury lifestyle, investigators and journalists and former associates were beginning to examine the foundation beneath the empire. and what they found would eventually attract the attention of authorities in multiple countries. While Andrew Tate was becoming one of the most influential men on earth, questions were growing louder about how he had acquired the wealth and power that made such influence possible. Those questions would eventually lead investigators to Romania, and that is where this story begins to change dramatically. Long before Romanian prosecutors came knocking on Andrew Tate's door, there were already serious questions being asked in the United Kingdom. Questions that Andrew Tate would spend years trying to explain away. But these were questions that were not going away. As his webcam empire expanded, allegations began surfacing from women who claimed they had been manipulated, abused, threatened, and controlled. He controlled these women, some of them he was in relationships with, by controlling their financial interests. Years before most Americans had ever heard his name, British authorities had already been examining allegations involving Andrew Tate and his brother. His brother kind of gets lost in the sauce, but they are monsters of the same ilk. The investigations would eventually become one of the most controversial aspects of the story, because Tate and his supporters will always point out that early investigations did not result in criminal charges. That's true. What is also true is that the allegations did not disappear. They just followed him year after year, country after country. And then Andrew Tate made a series of comments that would later age about as gracefully as unrefrigerated milk left out on the Las Vegas Strip during July. During interviews and online appearances, Andrew Tate openly discussed why he preferred living in Romania. Among the reasons he gave was his belief that authorities there were less likely to aggressively pursue sexual assault allegations. At one point, he suggested that in parts of Eastern Europe, victims were more likely to face skepticism from the police. I mean, that's a strange selling point, don't you think? When deciding where to relocate, most of us ask questions like, how are the schools? What's the weather like? How much is the rent? Andrew Tate was evaluating countries like a man shopping for jurisdictions with the least inconvenient law enforcement. Now, needless to say, those comments would become incredibly important later on. When prosecutors eventually laid out their allegations, critics immediately pointed back to Tate's own statements. And suddenly, what had once sounded like boastful entertainment bravado took on a much darker appearance. Then came civil claims. Then came additional investigations. Then came increased media scrutiny. And journalists like Heidi Blake began pulling together a picture that stretched across multiple countries and many years. According to Heidi Blake's recent reporting, former associates, alleged victims, court records, and internal communications paint a picture that looks very different from the self-made billionaire image that Andrew Tate wants to project online. Authorities in Romania allege that Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, his brother, and others were involved in an organized operation that recruited women through romantic relationships before exploiting them for financial gain. That is human trafficking. Prosecutors allege this is human trafficking. They allege the formation of an organized criminal group. These are charges similar to what we've seen levied against the mafia. And then additional allegations involving sexual misconduct would follow. The Tate brothers have repeatedly denied all wrongdoing, but by now the story had become impossible to ignore. For years, Andrew Tate had sold himself as a man who had beaten the system, a man too smart to get caught, too rich to fail, too influential to touch. Now he was facing allegations that threatened everything. And perhaps the most remarkable thing was what happened next. Judas Priest, it is just depressing. His audience grew. Millions of followers interpreted every investigation as proof that this person is powerful and that institutions are afraid of him. The charges became evidence of persecution. The allegations became evidence of a conspiracy. The investigations became evidence of a cover-up. It was a masterclass in modern celebrity. For most of his followers, the facts don't matter. It's the story that matters. And the story they had chosen was very simple. Andrew Tate was the hero, Everyone else was the villain. This is the definition of a cult. But the problem with that cult narrative is that reality has a nasty habit of eventually showing up. And Romanian prosecutors were about to bring a lot of reality to Andrew Tate's front door. For years, Andrew Tate sold this very specific fantasy. A man who could say and do whatever he wanted. A man beyond consequences. But then the consequences started arriving. And they arrived from multiple directions at once. Romanian prosecutors accused Andrew Tate, his brother Tristan, and others of participating in an organized criminal group and engaging in human trafficking, much like we've seen in RICO cases, mafia cases, things like that. But Andrew Tate was also charged with rape in the Romanian case. That is very, very different from exploitation, although it is not surprising. They're adjacent crimes. The Romanian case became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings involving an online influencer in modern history. At various points, the brothers were jailed. They were placed under house arrest. They were subjected to judicial controls. And then they were restricted from traveling while the case moved through the Romanian courts. Then things became even more complicated because Romania was not the only country interested in prosecuting Andrew Tate. British authorities had never forgotten the allegations originating in the United Kingdom. In 2024, Romanian courts approved a British extradition request connected to allegations dating back to the period between 2012-2015. My script is messed up right there. You guys know I write a script. Sometimes I have people that are new comment and be like, it seems like you're reading a script. I openly tell you guys I research and write a script. I'm almost 56 years old. I can't remember all this shit. But the court ruled that any extradition would have to wait until Romanian legal proceedings were completed first. I mean, it's pretty telling. One country wanted him, another country already had him, and both legal systems were essentially standing in line. That is not generally considered a positive development. You know, when governments begin taking numbers to prosecute you. Then came another major development. In 2025, British prosecutors authorized 21 criminal charges against Andrew and Tristan Tate. Reports indicated the charges include allegations involving human trafficking, bodily harm, prostitution-related offenses, rape, and other very serious crimes. And the civil litigation has continued in Britain. At this point, the legal situation surrounding Andrew Tate has become so sprawling that it resembles one of those conspiracy boards in detective movies, you know, with the red strings connecting photographs across the wall. We've got Romania, we've got Britain, civil claims, criminal charges, extradition requests, appeals, investigations. And through it all, Tate has continued insisting that he is innocent and the victim of politically motivated persecution. Now, the reason that I decided to cover this person now, been following this saga for a while, but it's because I saw this reporting by Heidi Blake, and I realized I hadn't heard an update for a while. We're going to be talking about these charges for years, so I thought it would be a good idea to lay out the groundwork now, and then I can update you when we have more proceedings occur. In April of 2026, a Romanian court lifted the remaining judicial control against the brothers, but the investigations remain active. Just last month, May of 2026, prosecutors expanded the investigation to include allegations that Andrew Tate incited hatred and discrimination against women through his online content. Oh no, here come the free speech comments. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences. I just wish that there would be like a mandatory constitutional law 101 for dummies, me included. I'd take it before you're allowed to comment on anything that has to do with the Constitution online. But that would violate the Constitution. One of the most sacred rights in America is the right to be stupid. We're all painfully aware of that. And I ain't claiming to be some sort of nuclear physicist here. It actually terrifies me that I'm so much smarter than so many other people. I didn't even go to college. I shouldn't be this much smarter than that many people. I'm like an average intelligence person, I thought. My mom and dad say otherwise, but I am the only person on earth whose parents say that. But that is why Andrew Tate is no longer effectively confined to Romania. But the case remains active and the allegations remain active. So does the extradition request. And he still does have some restrictions on him. As recently as a couple of weeks ago, he was reportedly traveling international while British authorities continued waiting for Romanian proceedings to conclude. They have to wait for those to be over so they can go forward with the extradition. Which brings us to the question everyone keeps asking. What happens next? The honest answer is stunningly simple and upsetting. Nobody knows. Andrew Tate's future now rests less on podcasts and followers than on prosecutors, judges, and witnesses. Evidence. For a man who built an empire convincing people he controlled everything, this may be the one thing he cannot control at all. I think what bothers me the most is that if Andrew Tate disappeared from the internet tomorrow, the ideas he helped popularize would not disappear with him. That's what bothers me. This was never really about one man. It was about an audience, mostly young men, many lonely, many frustrated, many angry. This was really I can't say it was the beginning of the incel movement, but it had a lot to do with it. And if you are not aware of just how large and just how dangerous the incel community is, I have some very bad news for you. Anthropologists will be studying this millennia from now. It is massive. It is affecting every young man in this, I want to say, world. I know that can't be true because I know cultures are different, but the Americas, Canada, a lot of European countries, the incel movement is so upsetting. And this is always what kills me. The same people that will complain and say, I don't owe Black people reparations. It wasn't me that did that to them. Will turn around and say, I blame women for my loneliness because they did that to me. So you're shirking responsibility where you want and putting responsibility where you want, while taking zero accountability for your own situation. Andrew Tate is a man who runs on absolutes, and he is now living in a very uncertain world. Human beings crave certainty, especially during confusing times, and people like Andrew Tate understand that better than anyone else. They have this psychopathic, sociopathic brain wiring that makes them a born predator. They can sniff out weakness, even over a computer screen, and they can sell you what you are missing. They have this scary, innate ability to know what it is that people want. And the more desperate the person is, the more willing they are to be manipulated. He's sold these young men certainty. He's sold them belonging. And most importantly, he sold them someone else to blame. It's not your fault that you can't get a girl to sleep with you. It's feminism's fault. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you haven't showered this week, that you don't have a job, that you live in your mom's basement, that you haven't brushed your hair or your teeth, that you don't wash your car, that you don't clean yourself up in public. No, it has nothing to do with any of that. You're desirable just the way you are. It's the woman's fault for not wanting you. And then that grew into, not only is it the women that are against you, it's the government that's against you, the universities that are against you. Take your pick. Every problem has a villain, and every villain has a solution. Villains always come with solutions. That's how they gain power. And in this case, the solution always involves subscribing, following, joining, purchasing. It is so funny how that works. The reality is that Andrew Tate did not invent these ideas. He just packaged them for the right time and the right place. He is just another cult leader. We study them here. We talk about them here all the time. They are no different from each other. While millions of followers are watching clips about becoming an alpha male, investigators were examining allegations of exploitation. There are two competing versions of Andrew Tate: the self-made truth teller, the alleged exploiter, the fearless rebel, the accused criminal. One version has made him wealthy. The other version may ultimately determine how he spends years of his life. As I wrote this and as I speak this, the legal battles continue. The Tate brothers continue denying wrongdoing. The courts have not yet delivered a final answer. No matter how many subscribers someone has, no matter how many luxury cars are parked in the driveway, eventually the legal system asks a much simpler question. What actually happened? Well, that question is still being answered. The bigger question for me is, how in the hell did we get here? How did this nobody become one of the most influential male role models on the planet? How did we end up in the mess we're in with our government? The answers say much more about us than it ever will about people like Andrew Tate. People like Andrew Tate do not create this hunger. They feed it. They don't create the loneliness. They monetize it. They don't create the anger. They harness it. And that is why this story matters. Not because Andrew Tate is unique. He isn't. History has always produced men who promise strength and certainty and easy answers. Their packaging changes and the technology changes, but the formula remains exactly the same. Find people's fears, tell them who to blame, tell them you alone understand the truth, then convince them that criticism is proof you are right. For years, that formula worked extraordinarily well for Andrew Tate. The question now is whether it can survive prosecutors, judges, evidence, and time. Eventually, every influencer faces the same opponent, reality. And unlike a podcast host, reality doesn't care how many followers you have. It doesn't care how many clips you have that go viral. Reality only cares about the truth. And somewhere in the courtrooms, people are still trying to figure out exactly what that truth is. For Andrew Tate, that may be the only audience that truly matters now. And now I will just go ahead and click off online, and I will not be back for a week. You guys would truly not believe the comments, the hate, the threats, the things that are said to me when I post episodes like this. You don't see them because I filter my comments because I don't want you guys to get upset. I want this community to be a place where we build things and we have conversations and discussions and even debates that are based on something productive. And as we all know, those of us that have been friends for a while, I am fiercely defensive of you, and some of you are fiercely defensive of me. And I just couldn't love you more for that. But when you see the comments that are directed at me, it ruins your day. You end up getting in arguments with people that are not worth your time. So I just remove them. Those people's opinions don't mean anything to me. If you come on with a genuine comment in opposition, you have something else to say, you don't agree with something, I welcome that. But if you're going to come on and call me old and fat and ugly and stupid and an idiot and stuff, you're just gone. And I don't go back and unblock people. But I will be ignoring my comments for a few days. I'll let the filter do the work. Hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. And don't forget, I've got my podcasts. They are both on Apple and Spotify. 15-Minute Mysteries with Stacy Lee and Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. I love you guys. I hope you're hanging in there. Stay safe. Be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.